Ladies and gentlemen, I will begin with the axiom: in modern Ukraine, combating corruption is an issue of a national security. So I'd like to make a brief remind you some facts from recent history. When in summer we watched a paradoxal and troublesome picture when there were heavy fighting on the front line here in Kyiv. There was a most difficult moment for the all anti-corruption vertical when the authorities of Ukraine wanted to liquidate independence of anti-corruption bodies in Ukraine. And a mass of people decided to rally against this decision. This was called the cardboard protests because people were rallying bearing cardboard posters in which it was written, "What am I fighting for? What is my father, brother, or sister fighting for?" and so on. And people from other countries observed this. Some people observed that from near abroad. Some observed it from inside the country, like Semen, Kryvonos. So first of all, I would like to talk about lessons which we and you have taken from those events. The question is to you: what lessons have you taken from that? And the second question: can you say now that NABU since that time has become stronger? If not, why? Thank you very much. First, I will begin with the second question. I will give you the answer. Yes, the NABU has become stronger after July when our independence was restored. I think the public noticed it on our cases, pre-trial investigations of the most visible cases. The work is being done. The work is in progress. So definitely NABU has become stronger thanks to Ukrainian society, thanks to people in the street who raised their voices against that decision in summer. But we also have to speak about vulnerabilities because those events demonstrated vulnerability. It's not the institution which stood for itself, but with the help of people, civil society and independent media, which means that we still have a lot to work on for such an attack to become impossible in the future. And we should work not on strengthening one or two institutions, but we have to make the majority of national institutions independent, for them not to fulfill the orders of certain groups in the country, but just to follow the law of Ukraine. I just want to say that there were many different institutions who participated in that attack, to the independence of which there are lots of questions. I may mention judges from Pechers court who hasn't taken any one legal and legally founded decisions, neither towards our organization or property which was arrested. So they took decisions only for the benefit of one side. All that was possible because there is no independence of the judiciary system. Somebody ordered them to do this. Yes, we have now the criminal investigation in progress. When we get necessary information, we will document all that. And beyond the criminal process, I'm not going to make any assessment. I'm not going to make political slogans. Same we may speak about reform in other law enforcement authorities, the General Prosecutor's Office, all that in the conditions of the European Union. So when we have done this, then such attacks towards other independent institutions would be impossible. Speaking about NABU and Special Anti-Corruption Prosecution, we were speaking about setting up a really independent institution to calculate the cases against these organizations, as well as the issues on tapping and other things which were signed by Taras Kachka and European Commissioner Marta Kos. We will speak about these issues, and as far as I understand, NABU has become stronger, but still is in the mode of total defense. Once again, NABU and Special Anti-Corruption Procuracy, we are connected between ourselves, are in this situation when they don't have all the necessary instruments to investigate corruption cases. And the same institutions remain in power, which any moment may fulfill somebody's orders and attack anti-corruption infrastructure. After NACP got those problems, what did they do? First of all, I would like to greet organizers of this event, that we have one panel dedicated to corruption, because I'm sure that, though it may look strange, but the corruption, both internal and external, is a factor which makes its impact on national security of Ukraine. That's why, first of all, I would like to speak or to say that efficient anti-corruption activities and intelligence activities and effective activities of State Investigation Bureau will provide the security of our organizations and freedom from both external and internal influence. And that's why we need to strengthen the authorities which are engaged into counterintelligence operations, strengthen National Investigation Bureau. Who do you mean? The state. I mean both legislative and organizational. You say we need to strengthen anti-intelligence, counterintelligence function. Who should do that? The third element which I mentioned, to develop a system of anti-corruption institutions which would be able effectively and independently counteract corruption. We may speak about such issues which Semen mentioned. This is the high-quality expert evaluation, quick evaluation, getting information, tapping information from communication channels, a registration of criminal investigations against members of parliament. Is it the issue of somebody's political will? What's the problem? First of all, those things which I mentioned mostly concern legislation. It may be not enough to have a relevant legislation, but there may be organizational issues like premises. Speaking about expertise institution, this is the building, the personnel. So it's a whole set of legislative and organizational measures. Then I would like to ask Vira to share her impressions of what's going on after the attempts of the government to attack anti-corruption authorities' independence. First of all, my personal vision I would like to present. As a citizen of Ukraine, I would like to say a lot, but as a judge, I cannot say everything. And what is really visible over the 6.5 years of existence of Supreme Anti-Corruption Court, and 3 years when I was the chair of that court, it is very visible that we have too little people in Ukraine who really want us to be efficient in our work. Unlike NABU and SAP situation, strengthening the capabilities of the Supreme Anti-Corruption Court does not require any legislative changes. In fact, those issues which lay in the area of capabilities of anti-corruption court, they lay in the area of political will to fulfill international obligations in this area. In the context of Supreme Anti-Corruption Court, it's a huge problem because over this period of time, NABU, SAP, Independent Court, because we are the judiciary body, I mean our court, but we feel that gap between strengthening capabilities and with all the problems which Semen mentioned, so the capability of pre-trial investigative authority and the court is growing every year, in spite of the fact that no legislative initiative, systemic changes, or huge budget financing is not needed for these decisions. The problem exists, yes. We are telling about it everywhere. The only difference between ourselves and pre-trial investigation bodies is that so far nobody tries to influence the court. I saw in the internet some photos that you were allocated certain premises that looked terrible. We've been engaged into this situation for 6 years, and for 3 years I was very seriously working on that. We were offered a number of different premises. We looked through, and they said, you don't like anything, then find yourself. We found the premises of the liquidated ministry, which meet all the requirements of the Supreme Anti-Corruption Court and is not used by the ministry. But when we started paying attention to that facility, I thought, thanks God, we might solve this issue of the Supreme Anti-Corruption Court premises. They said, no, we have nowhere to move the liquidated ministry personnel, and that's why the court, in spite of the obligation to provide the premises and raise institutional capability, will still be placed in different parts of Kyiv, and the increase of the number of personnel of the court may lead to the fact that there are no premises for people to work in, and the problem actually caused by the lack of political will. Allan, at the beginning, I mentioned that people on the street stood for independence of SAP and NABU, but I must also say that international pressure played its role. So please share with us your vision of this situation.
Thank you so much. Let me just say a few words about the EU-ACI and why I'm here. The EU-ACI, EU Anti-Corruption Initiative in Ukraine, is an EU program that is implemented by the government of Denmark. It's basically a capacity-building program, so that's like where I come from when I comment on these matters. If you allow just a few remarks about the broader perspective, I think sometimes it's useful to look up and say, what is this all about? Why are these institutions so important for Ukraine? And looking back in time, they are part of reforms that have taken place since Maidan that have been extremely important for how the fight against corruption has developed in Ukraine. I think it's fair to say that Ukraine today is much different from Ukraine 2013. We have now institutions in place that are independent, that have capacity, and that are delivering very good results in fighting high-level corruption. High-level corrupt officials that before Maidan, to a large extent, had impunity. They could do whatever. They were somehow above the law, and that's not how it is anymore. Every year we see that the institutions are delivering better and better results. Last year, NABU and SAPO delivered indictments to 280 individuals, the highest number ever. 109 verdicts in the High Anti-Corruption Court, the highest number ever. Since High Anti-Corruption Court was established, more than 200 has received prison sentence. Not because there's more high-level corruption in Ukraine. Our assessment is this is a cleaning up operation that is ongoing. It's corruption. It's the bad behavior of the parts that are being challenged. So, from our point of view, what then happened in July last year was something that threatened the independence of these institutions, and of course, for our international partners, for our EU colleagues, this was a very serious issue. We knew that it was the independence of these institutions that somehow make them successful. Then I think what we saw in the streets of Kyiv and other big cities in Ukraine back in July was once more a demonstration of the importance of the active civil society in Ukraine and the independent media that throughout this journey since Maidan have been so important to support the anti-corruption institutions and the framework that is now in place. So for us working with capacity building, two issues that came on our agenda after the crisis in July. One was that we need to support the institutions in becoming more resilient, being better at managing crisis, perhaps preventing crisis if it's possible. The other lessons learned was, yes, we have from the very beginning of this program supported civil society and independent media, but perhaps we need to do even more of that kind. So we actually also allocated more funds to such activities. Part of what we did was also to assist our partners in creating more awareness as to their results. We know that while they are met with support from civil society, it's not commonly known exactly what these institutions are doing and the results they are delivering. So we have actually done quite a lot in the field of awareness raising together with our partners. So I think that's the short version. Thanks.
Allan, я хотіла коротке уточнення. Нещодавно наші колеги...
Recently, our colleagues, Ukrainian journalists, spoke to Euro Commissioner for Expansion, Marta Korsev, and she was asked, has Ukraine got back the trust after the attack on anti-corruption bodies? She said, no, of course not. This will stay always because you can adopt or cancel laws, but it's not easy to get back the trust. Do you agree with this?
I would say, of course, I will have to agree with the EU Commissioner, and I do agree that of course it created concern in many EU capitals what happened last July. I do think that when it comes to the work of the anti-corruption institutions, they managed to keep the trust. And I think now you asked about the international trust, but at least what we see in the surveys in Ukraine, they're actually gaining more trust among the people here. And I think that that's actually extremely important. We saw the last survey for 25 that NABU scored quite well in terms of people's trust in the effectiveness of this institution, and I think that's really important.
Я думаю, йшлося, можливо, про довіру до України в цілому.
Well, we talked about the trust for Ukraine as a country. Okay, but you've heard all this, and all participants made their contributions. I'd like to find out about your observations, your findings, and perhaps you have the answer to the question, how come that the only preventive tool to put pressure on anti-corruption bodies was the street protests? I mean, is that normal, or is something wrong here in Ukraine?
Hello, everybody. Nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation and the honor to be here and to discuss about this serious issue with politicians. We can say that. I have some notes and to find the answers in your questions. And of course, it's, in the middle of a war, people were not defending the territory. They defending institutions, and they won. It's a strong message to politicians and from your country to Europe, because I don't know any country in Europe who where people go out to the streets and protest that anti-corruption agencies became under some ministries and some responsibilities. They lost their independence. So in our opinion, it's very, very strong, because if an institution cannot investigate the powerful people, it's an anti-corruption. It's not an anti-corruption institution. It's like decoration, and decorations doesn't not stop the corruption, because it only hides until it becomes a national security crisis.
Дякую. Я тоді вже перейду до деталей.
Okay, let me switch to details of some cases and some investigations, because we're talking about anti-corruption fight as a component of security system in Ukraine. And this infrastructure is one of the accomplishments of Ukraine. And so far, we see that it remains fragile and vulnerable. And the reason is that its key opponents are people who, time from time, become, personalities under investigation. I don't want to show a big elephant in this room, but after cardboard protests, NABU and SAPO made public results of anti-corruption investigation, which received the name Midage Gate. It's about corruption in energy sector and defense. And the investigation shows that top officials of the state were involved, such as Timur Midnic, for example. And that's, in fact, which gave the name to this scandal. When the organs made public these names, pennies dropped, and we understood why they were trying to suppress this. I have a question to Semen. The maximum time frame for investigation is 12 months. It's been 6 months since first notice of suspicion. Is there a danger that the case will be buried or be stifled, etc.? No, there is no. Can you explain? I can't. It's a secret of investigation. The case will be sent to court. We may have some additional episodes which we will have to investigate. Things are moving forward well. Are they trying to put spanners in the work? Well, if they try, there will be consequences. That's very brief, very succinctly. When can we expect the next notice of suspicion? Well, I cannot announce this. Secondly, you will never hear names from me. It's against European practice. The operation is called Maidan, and I'm not repeating any public statements or thoughts expressed in the public domain. I can only operate within the framework of the criminal investigation. We do not announce notices of suspicion. We know that we still have time. The case will make it to court. Detectives are confident. Prosecutors are confident. The public can have a peace of mind. Is it possible that plea bargaining will be used with the suspects? Look, there's a lot of talk about this, both from the politician, people who care, members of the public. Also, there are some attempts by suspects to use political forces or collaborating with some others, because it's not just one suspect, there are several involved. But I can state clearly, give the organs of pretrial investigation to do their work. Any thoughts, statements, opinions, materials, or anything that is not directly linked to this process and that has not been investigated by the detectives is irrelevant and can be construed as manipulation or something that is designed to undermine the investigation. Many people are involved who are blatantly manipulating in the public domain, using the facts that we have at our disposal at the stage of pretrial investigation. I am confident that the detectives, investigators can take a good job. I have no doubt about their integrity. I know they're professional, and I am confident that nothing and no one will stop this criminal investigation, and all the facts and all the evidence will be evaluated properly. Many aspects have still one concern. Search at the head of the office of the president, which took place in November last year, but still there's no notice of suspicion. Some people told me, I'm not sure if I should trust this or not, but they were saying that they saw notice of suspicion, but then something happened. I cannot comment what colleagues have claimed to have seen. The notice of suspicion has not been given yet. The notice can only be handed over only after all the investigative actions have been carried out. Search is only one of the ways, one of the methods that we use. Some manipulations that are being used, sometimes consciously, sometimes subconsciously, being aware of unawares, say, how could you search such a person? Well, from the standpoint of the criminal process, we don't care. That's why NABU and SAP are independent. His position, his job is relevant. If there is a need to search, we will search. This search was conducted based on the verdict of the judge from the Supreme Anti-Corruption Court. It was validated. There was good reason to do that in order to get evidence. Next stage is we will have to analyze the evidence. The search is done in order to either corroborate or refute our version. And based on the publications in the media, the anti-corruption activists, and I have been monitoring this quite closely, they seem to have less doubt lately. Good. Now, let me ask a question to Vira. I have to admit that anti-corruption experts and journalists who monitor the anti-corruption topic often criticize anti-corruption bodies of Ukraine because there's too much plea bargaining. This is a widespread phenomenon in Europe as well. But in Ukraine, they call this safari or photo safari for corrupt officials. The schematic is fairly simple. Anti-corruption body catch a big fish, take photographs, get funds, notice of suspicions. The suspect, it looks like he's going behind bars, but then 1 or 2 years go past, and suddenly we see that the crime is requalified, and the suspect has now doors to do some donations, pay a fine, and go free. This was a case, for example, of Mykola Zlochevsky. For example, it looked like he was going to prison. He donated over 800 million hryvnia, paid a fine, and that was the end of the story. So let me ask Vira, how many agreements were approved by the Anti-Corruption Court for 2025 and early 2026?
First of all, I wanted to note that the trend that we have today is towards an increased number of verdicts based on plea bargaining agreements. And if we take 2025, 72 verdicts were made based on that type of agreements, and 102 people were convicted. So there is we actually need to note that in spite of a certain moral and ethical component, this institution of agreements is a very effective institution of criminal procedure. And if an individual pays a fine, a small fine, this is what the law says, that they're making donations. That is one side of the coin. Now the other side of the coin, that person is convicted. They mostly lose their jobs, their positions, and any corruption-related factors for the future become extinct. And very often they provide testimony that enables us to discover additional criminal offenses, and nobody counted the cost of the criminal proceedings. But this institution of agreements actually lets us place a value on that, or at least to understand how much money we can save. But does the combating corruption turns into a process where rich people can make donations and can buy their way out of prison by making donations to the armed forces of Ukraine? As far as plea bargaining agreements are concerned, I believe this is the most effective instrument. It is used all over the world. It unburdens the system of criminal justice and the courts. It helps the government recover the costs, and it does not mean that the person evades responsibility. Vira did not mention that there are agreements where there is an actual prison sentence, and the number of those agreements will increase. And we had this case of bribery of our 1 million hryvnias, and people were convicted to 2 to 4 years of imprisonment. And this type of agreements is not a way to evade punishment or penalties completely. So this gentleman you mentioned, he escaped before he committed this crime, and it is other law enforcement institutions that he was running from. And when he was in United Arab Emirates, when he was trying to suborn that bribe, and actually that agreement was approved by the Supreme Court, so that person did not evade justice. Then we're talking about exposure. When this agreement is confidential, or, for instance, what do you think? Should the agency of pretrial investigation directly name the person and publicly say that this person that exposed another person to us who was the organizer of this criminal activity in a specific case. First of all, it would be a violation of the law, because that would endanger that person, and nobody else would conclude that sort of agreement with us anymore. So it needs to remain confidential, you mean? Now, what is your proposal? I do believe that there is a calling for justice in this society. For decades, presidents, officials, members of parliament have promised that corrupt individuals will be in jail. And you have a lot of grand corruption exposed, big fish caught, but then those persons go free by making donations to the armed forces of Ukraine. First of all, those people are convicted. So it is a delayed sentence. It is a suspended sentence, in effect. So that person would not be able to hold public office anymore. But let me ask you, well, in this case, what would independent media and the civil society have us do? I would like to hear your suggestions. And I took this microphone because there is poor communication. We did not communicate enough why the decisions are being kept confidential, why a person can provide evidence or give testimony in a specific case. But obviously, the society needs to be confident in the agency of pretrial investigation and the high anti-corruption court, because obviously if that person exposes X and Y or Z, that would be fantastic. But obviously we need to communicate these cases much more clearly, because those are high-profile cases. You see, you do have in other law enforcement agencies, a lot of cases just die quietly because the term expires or they have plea bargaining agreements. But I do understand that we need to communicate better to minimize manipulations around this issue, because otherwise we might destroy a very effective institution. And let me put it very directly, it helped us expose many and investigate successfully many high-profile cases. So if you're letting me go, that I will want to thank you and let you go. But obviously we need an arbitrator here. Perhaps, what do you think? Can anti-corruption system be considered successful if on the one hand it provides donations to the army, it provides penalties that go to the state budget, but it fails to fulfill the principal demand of the society, that is corrupt officials being put in jail. So what is the Lithuanian experience in that respect? Do you often see top government officials using that tool of plea bargaining agreements, in effect?
Of course, we have a different system, and we have political officials in prison, and we at the moment we investigated 2 former prime ministers, and it's the price of independence, when we are independent. I heard your discussion. Of course, the discussion, it's difficult to be like court here and to say the right answer. But you know, the main message from your country to Europe, you have very good system. The NABU investigates, NACP prevents, SAPO prosecutes, high anti-corruption court make decision, and the question to Europe, all the countries had it or not? I think not all. And we have example of Hungary, when through all the period, the politicians' appointments were decreasing the law enforcement authorities, and in 2024, as I remember, the funding from the UA was halted, and of course, maybe some changes came now after some elections. So I think you are in a right way. You need to find a little bit different. Today I met some people here in this beautiful hotel, we were politicians, and when they recognized me from this authorities I am, they said, it's a Lithuanian Nabu? Yes, and they started like distance from me. So I mean, my recommendation to all these authorities, don't find the friendly way, but to find the communication strategy to politicians. Because in Lithuania, what we are doing, we introducing the strategic anti-corruption guidelines. In the past, I was Vice Minister of Justice. No one from institution came to me and said, listen, you have problem here. Our recommendation how to solve this corruption risk or other risk is here. So now since 2023, we organize the meetings with ministries, with Prime Minister, and sharing the recommendation based on evidence and to how we can solve this problem. And it's not a relationship, but we became like openness to them, and they don't afraid us. Of course, I don't answer to your question, but I share our Lithuanian experience.
Нас просять вже завершувати, тому я попрошу коротко.
Well, they're asking us to conclude this discussion, so let's try to give very brief answers. Now Ukraine is in the process of approving its anti-corruption strategy until the year 2030, and so what is was the most turbulent for society, so to speak, because some competitive selection procedures were removed. So will there be no more competitive selections for those institutions? As a representative of the developer, I can tell you that the draft anti-corruption strategy that was sent to the government contains initiatives that are designed to provide for competition-based selection of the general prosecutor and improved competitions for the State Bureau Investigation and the Chief of the National Police. So now it is being processed by the government. It has not been approved yet. So we'll have to see whether those competitive selection procedures remain there when it is registered with the parliament. So if those competitions are retained there, so what shall we hear from our international partners if you do have that competitive selection procedure for those top officials? So what will it mean for Ukraine if those competition requirements are removed from the new strategy? What would it mean for Ukraine, and what your response is going to be?
Thanks. It's difficult to with a few seconds left of our panel session. Let me just make the point that we have had these competitive selection processes in place for the anti-corruption institutions for some years now, and I think the experience from that, they are positive. But mainly, I mean, we are also talking about something here that is like a political question that goes beyond what we can somehow engage in as a technical program.
Дуже дипломатична відповідь. Я дуже дякую всім учасникам дискусії і гостям, які слухали цю дискусію.